Hello, everyone. Welcome to the session. Am I audible to you guys? If I'm audible, then please type a yes in the comment section so that I can know that I'm audible to you. Okay, fantastic. So, hi everyone, good morning, good evening, good afternoon. I am Dipinti Ghoshal, an e-GMAT alumnus and also an incoming MBA candidate at Dartmouth Tuck School of Business. So today I'm here to host a session with Malvika Vakil, who is an GMAT 730 scorer, and she has also secured an admit into Cornell Johnson School of Business. So welcome to the session, Malvika. We are really glad to have you with us here, and congratulations on all your admits.
Thank you. Thank you. Equally glad to be here.
Great. Awesome. So I hope that we have a wonderful session and we are able to share a lot of insights with the audience. So quickly, I will take you guys through the entire structure of the session. I'm just going to explain in brief how this session will be structured. So first of all, we will talk about Malvika's profile. Now, interestingly, Malvika also has an MBA from Symbiosis Pune. So we're going to ask a lot of questions around that, and we're going to ask her whether the first MBA was really helpful in framing her applications, and how did she go about, finding that particular point where she realized that she would have to go for the second MBA. Then we will move over to her GMAT journey because she's a 730 scorer. We'll ask her about her GMAT journey in brief. And following that, we'll ask her about her B school selection strategy because she already has an MBA, as I mentioned. So what is the strategy that she used in order to select her B schools? After that, we'll move over to Cornell Johnson specific MBA questions. We're going to ask her about the essays. Johnson has some very exciting essays. We're going to ask her how she tackled it. And we'll also share very interesting insights with all the future applicants. So stay tuned till the end, and you can ask all your questions. We'll take them up at the end of the session, but do start asking your questions in the comment sections from now on, and Malvika and I will take them at the end of the session. So I hope you're ready to begin, Malvika.
Yeah, let's go ahead.
Okay, great. So let's talk a little bit about your profile. So as I understand, you started your career journey with Infosys, and then you sort of, after maybe a year and a half, you decided to go for an MBA from Symbiosis. So could you tell me the motivation around this particular career choice?
Yeah, so as it happened, I had completed my graduation, I had completed my engineering, and then switched over to more with Infosys. An interesting 1.5 year where my job was purely that of a coder. And the way it happened was that, of course, I enjoyed the coding aspect of it, but also realizing sometimes, that higher up the ladder, you need to have a business understanding as well. So that primarily happened to be the motivation for taking up my MBA first time around. And also kind of was fascinated by this whole world of marketing and sales. Realized that they are the forerunners in everything, and wanted to be where all the action was happening. So yeah, that happened to be the primary motivation for taking up my first MBA.
Okay, that's interesting. So right, that means you took up MBA in Symbiosis. You decided to go for that. So let's talk about your specialization in MBA and what did you take up post your MBA. So that will also figure out what are you working in now and what is your professional experience all about.
Sure. So like I said, my pre-MBA experience was purely coding. So I completed my graduation and took that up. And my post-MBA experience was into marketing and sales. So I've worked in the FMCG and FMCD industries. Currently, I'm with a CPG company. And across these 5.5 years, I have worked in roles across sales and marketing. So sales, generally like the way it happens in India, like FMCG sales are designed. So you have a team reporting to you and are responsible for a certain revenue figure. Marketing, where you're handling brands and handling a particular P&L and activations. So I would say 5.5 years of sales and marketing, but predominantly marketing.
Okay, that's an interesting switch actually from the technical background to the marketing background. That's a very interesting switch, and it sounds very interesting actually. So let's talk about your motivation for now. Let's talk about that. So how many years of experience do you have in total till
6 years
now?
in all. 6
Okay,
years.
so that means including
6 years
your Infosys
of,
experience.
no, 6 years of post MBA and one
Okay,
and a half years
okay.
prior to that. Yeah.
Okay, right. So let's talk about these 6 years. What was it? Say that. So you have been working in marketing and even in brand management, as you mentioned. So what was the particular point where you realized that okay, so you have an MBA, but then you need to go for that particular second MBA. So what was the tipping point, or what was the ignition that made you realize that?
Okay, couple of things. So one is, of course, that I needed an industry switch, which is one major consideration for going ahead with the second MBA. The other really was to get more global exposure. So in the marketing experience, particularly that I had, I realized that a lot of those experiences were based on understanding global practices, and bringing down that best of those global practices or adopting those global practices to what's more relevant in the Indian market and India context. So that was one major reason. So you have individual experiences like that, and if you extrapolate it to what might be a classroom experience or even professional experience beyond that, where you're working or discussing things on a more global platform, that's definitely an additional perspective that I wanted to have. The other reason mainly was to get this switch to product marketing. So I was in the marketing and CPG space, but in a very traditional industry. But even in that traditional industry, you would see technology interventions that are happening. So in every form of consumer interaction, all those changes, even if it's not with the consumer, even if it's, say, with a third party or an influencer, all those interactions essentially are happening through technology. So again, wanted to make this switch, and use my marketing abilities, use my marketing experience to probably drive an internet first or a technology based business.
Okay. So, right. So that what you said makes complete sense. And I think that, even in the traditional companies, as you mentioned, the tech intervention has been happening at such a huge pace that keeping yourself abreast with these kind of technology, I would say, is very important. And that is why you decided to go for the second international MBA, right? Okay. So, so let's talk about, that you are at your job and you decide to go for the second MBA. So did you start with, thinking about the GMAT? So was GMAT the first point that you looked at?
I mean, of course, without doubt, and this is something I would advise everybody, it obviously makes sense to shortlist your programs and colleges that you would want to apply to. But for us Indian candidates, I think one major hurdle that you need to cross is obviously the GMAT, and it definitely helps to get this obstacle off your path, right? So it's best to focus on the GMAT first. I mean that's how I approached it as well. I knew what programs I wanted to apply to. I looked at the average score and understood what my target score should be for somebody with my profile and experience, and definitely approach the GMAT first before tackling the applications.
Okay. So let's talk about this important point that you mentioned, that even before, or say while you were preparing for your GMAT journey, you sort of started looking at school averages and started figuring out what your average score should be. So could you just bring that out in more detail? Like, so which schools you looked at and what was their average score and how did you place yourself in that marginal score that you wanted?
Yes, I think two things that are important to consider here. One, obviously everybody has a journey, and what your post MBA goal is. So with me, I was very clear about applying only to the 1Y programs. So it makes sense to first look at the average score. Then I think LinkedIn is a great forum. You can definitely look for people with similar profiles and understand that what is their success rate in your target schools. And then a lot of times people have mentioned GMAT scores on their LinkedIn profile, right? So you get some fair idea about what the average score would be like. And then obviously it makes sense to target, let's say, a 20-point or a 30-point higher GMAT score. At least that's what the target should be. And of course, later it comes down to how much you're actually able to manage. So makes sense to understand it from both points of view. One is, of course, the GMAT score, and one is, the overall profile of people at the school. And so that'll give you some idea of, what the acceptance rate is for somebody with your profile, and then what is the target score to look at.
Right, right. So this is a very interesting insight. And I think even I had read this in an article somewhere that before you start looking at schools, you need to find for resume siblings. Now, as Malvika mentioned rightly, resume sibling is a person who has not the same kind of profile as you do, but a similar kind of profile. And LinkedIn is a great forum that you can just play around with the searches, and you can find people who have achieved that particular say post MBA goal with your kind of profile, and that would help you strategize your entire journey, right? So
and the other thing, so I was saying the other thing that I noticed about these application and the process in general was that people are willing to talk and help, right? So you will come across a lot of people with similar profiles, and at least I didn't face too much of an issue in writing to people and hearing back from them. Like, they might not have responded immediately, but most people were okay to, getting on a call and discussing what their profile was. And for all you know, somebody might have gotten in and, submitted their application on that whole similar career goal. So it definitely helps to understand what their journey has been like. And it's a good idea to reach out to people and understand, what is it that you could put in your application. And are you even giving yourself a fair chance targeting that business school?
Right, right. So yeah, once you had done all of that, I think, as you mentioned, that you started looking at GMAT, and then you had some sort of a target score in mind. So, and then you scored a GMAT 730, which is an amazing score. It's the 96th percentile. So, so why don't you just take us through your GMAT journey in brief? How did you study? Because you you have an MBA, and you are in kind of like a marketing and brand management job. So how did you structure your time? How did you divide your time, and how did you go through about in your GMAT preparation?
Okay. I think so. I took the exam 3 times in all. The first was pretty much without any prep, and there was more to get an idea as to how would I score, what is my starting point like. Ended up getting a 680 on that exam. All I done was taking the mock exams that time, and post that I realized that if I have to target, let's say, anything above a 730. I will have to, take up a course and subscribe to it, and also set up a schedule or a timetable for myself. So after that, I enrolled with e-GMAT. I think I'd seen a lot of videos, and also taken up one of the mock tests, and I really liked the Scholaranium platform. So I thought they'd laid it out very well, and it was structured to the entire preparation. So that's why I decided to go ahead with e-GMAT. In fact, so this is again something that's important. Everyone has a different starting point, and everyone has strengths and weaknesses. I think this is one aspect that I was ignoring in the in my first attempt, because I was like religiously following the course and what it should be. Without really knowing where my weakness was and what should I be focusing more on. So that's how I started my first prep. And even though I think I'd given it a fair bit of time, the second time that I took the exam, I could only improve my score from a 680 to 690, despite putting in all the time and effort. It was later that I realized that, I need a plan that is specific to my performance on the exam. That's where I approached the e-GMAT team again, analyzed my ESR, and they actually helped me with the study plan that I followed. That finally led me to a 730. So while I would say the time and effort I spent on preparation was pretty much, it might have been more in the first attempt, but it was this targeted prep which helped me. The other aspect really is on time management and improving your stamina for the exam, because you might in bits and pieces you might be able to achieve peak performance, but it is important that on the day of the exam, where you're sitting there for 3.5 hours in an atmosphere like that, it's absolutely essential that you give yourself enough trial and practice, which is similar to the exam environment. So second time around, I also played give equal emphasis to preparing in a real atmosphere and ensuring that I was sitting at length to give all the mock exams. So that's another thing that helped me through.
Right. So, I mean, you took it in August, right? If you mentioned it to me, August last year. So, did you take
Yeah.
the online version or did you take it at the center?
No, I just realized, I had to be in the real environment to take the exam. While that adds to pressure, I also think somewhere it improves your performance in some way. So I didn't
Yeah.
risk that online exam. That's also because I had a choice, and again, the centers were open at that time, and I could get a
Yes.
slot. But the situation might be different for different people, and
Mhm.
your preference also might be different.
Yeah, but then you took it at the center, right?
To get the center.
Yeah. Okay. Even I can completely relate to that because I took my third attempt of GMAT last year in about September or October, and then I was also torn apart between GMAT online and GMAT at in the center. But yes, like you said, I completely agree that at the center you get that particular test kind of feeling, and at home you're like, okay, so it's a test, and you don't know how your internet connection's gonna be. If it's even gone for a little amount of time, then the test can be cancelled. So
Yeah,
yeah.
there are a lot of risk factors to it, but again, I think some people
Yes.
are way more comfortable in the home environment, so to each his own.
Definitely, definitely, definitely. So right now that you got your GMAT score with a 730, and you are in August, that's right. So you took your
Yeah.
GMAT and you got your score in August. So now let's come to the business school. So now you already have an MBA and you need to target very specific MBAs. So as you mentioned earlier as well, so you cannot just apply to randomly a bunch of schools. There has to be some strategy into that. So how did you go about in this process? And let's say, which are the schools that you targeted and why did you target them?
Yeah. So again, there are two reasons to this. One is, of course, that I had an MBA already, and I wasn't looking at giving another 2 years to business school.
Hmm.
That was important. That depends on where you are in your life stage
Hmm.
and how much time you give to this. So that was a personal choice. The other being that, your post MBA goals also play a very important role in deciding whether you need an internship or not. What are the skills that you have currently, and what is your post MBA industry like? Like in my case, I was looking at just making this pivot from brand marketing to product marketing. So the core marketing skills is something that I have practiced over the last 6 years. And so I'm looking at making an industry switch. And for this, I feel that a 1 year program might suffice. This again might be different for different people. And I wouldn't say the golden rule is that if you have a prior MBA, that you should necessarily go ahead with the 1 year program only. A lot more relevant in this case is what your post MBA goals are. And in my case, I thought that it was achievable through a 1 year program. Again, a lot of it also has come through interactions with students who have been able to make this transition. So it seems like a feasible thing to do. And enough research has to go into this.
Right. Yeah. So that explains your rationale behind targeting the 1 year MBAs, right? So let's talk about the business schools that you applied. So what are the schools that you shortlisted initially?
So I was looking at only two 1 year programs. One is at
Hmm.
Cornell, where I applied in round 1, and the other is
Hmm.
Kellogg, where I applied in round 2. So these are my only two target programs.
Okay. Okay. So that means for round one you applied to Cornell, and you got into Cornell, right? So that I would say it's really commendable. I think you applied and then you got in. So how was the entire application process? So let's just hear about it in brief. So how did you proceed with your preparation? So did you take an admissions consultant first of all?
No, I did not. I
Hmm.
ended up speaking to a lot of consultants,
Hmm.
and I somehow realized that again, this is my personal experience, that consultants sometimes they have a very standard picture of what should go into essays, and
Hmm.
what qualities should you be talking about. I personally felt that I was a better judge of what I had done,
Hmm.
and what I could draw out of each of my experiences. And so I didn't really want to standardize the whole application process. And so after a lot of interactions with some of the consultants, I realized that probably I'm better off, writing it on my own, and then maybe getting it vetted by people who I know and who can add on to it.
Hmm. Okay. So yeah. So now that you decided that you'll craft your story on your own, and as I can see, you were very cognizant about, say, what has your experience been and what you would like to move into post MBA. So which I think is very important for crafting the right MBA story, right?
Yeah.
So let's talk about the essays that Cornell Johnson has in the particular of the 1 year MBA program. So there's a very interesting essay question, and I would like to start with that. So it talks about the back of the resume essay, and I think it's because even I was targeting. I wanted to apply to Cornell, but somehow I didn't get the time because I was busy with other business school applications. But yeah, they have that as a standard called back of the resume. So let's first try to understand that. What do you think, or what did you gauge from this particular essay question? That what did the AdCom really want to look in for in the candidates?
I think the question also very clearly mentions this, that through your other essays, the AdCom has a clear idea about what your achievements so far have been and what is it that you want to do professionally after you complete your MBA. But they're trying to gauge additionally, how will you merge with the class. So if I was to put it in short, like if your class had to judge you, or like they had like 5 minutes to get to know you, let's assume you're in an induction class and they have 5 minutes to know you, what is it that you bring to the table? So and linking this whole thing to an experience. So it says that what is that one life defining experience for you, and what did that experience teach you about yourself? So in short, that was the crux of that essay.
Okay. So I have seen a lot of people post, interesting YouTube videos for back of the resume. You're allowed to do that, right? You can post some multimedia images. What did you do for the back of the resume? So let's hear about that.
So I made it in the form of a newspaper article. That's what I did. So just to give you some background, my experience that I spoke about was a trekking expedition. Now, this might not sound major to a lot of people, but again, like I said, this is your story. So that experience particularly was special to me because I thought I overcame a lot of barriers and realized and had a significant bit of realization about my own self on that expedition, which is what I'd mentioned. And the way I'd put it across was to include pictures and put that whole thing across as a newspaper article.
Okay, that's really interesting. Actually, I have heard that for the first time. A newspaper article. That's amazing. And so what Malvika tries to say here is the story can be very simple. Like she said, it's a trekking expedition, and it may not sound like an extraordinarily huge achievement when she just talks about it, but it was very important for her, and she was able to portray how did she capture, or what all did she gain in life through that particular story. So that, I think, is the major important part that this essay does. And it's not just about writing huge things that you may or may not have accomplished. So yeah, very good. And I really love the approach that you did. Let's talk about the second essay that, Cornell has, which is, I think it is called Contribution to the Cornell Community, somewhere along the lines of that, right? Yeah. So let's talk about that.
Right. So again, this is one question that I spent a lot of time on. Because every school has a lot of these communities, and again, individually you might fit better into one community. Your contribution to some of the communities might be better based on your prior experience or what your interests are. So this involved a lot of outreach, speaking to students from both 1Y and 2Y program, and really mapping. So there are a lot of these interesting clubs and forums at Cornell. So there's EMI, there is Office for Diversity and Inclusion, there's Women Business Club. So a whole lot of things that you might be interested in. And then basis your interaction with the club members, the chair members of these clubs, you would get an idea of, how is it that they contribute to the Cornell community, not just in improving the brand Cornell, but also in helping the students on a day-to-day basis. So there are very unique ways in which you can craft this essay, particularly because you will be able to link your individual experiences to how you may be able to contribute. So for example, in my case, when you were talking about, the the Johnson's Women Business Conference. So I had done a lot of similar things at work, and I was able to establish that link clearly. I even went to the extent of understanding that how do the alumni contribute once they complete the program. What are the different ways in which they can contribute, and some very interesting examples on how they set up a fund. So obviously we hear of scholarships and things like that, but someone setting up a fund specifically to train students in professional networking or skills like that. So those are all very unique ideas, and to think of it, these are the things you would like to engage in, right, post your MBA. So that's how I drew the link between what I know as of now, what my experiences have been, and what is it that each of these clubs is uniquely doing, and how could I contribute to it. So lot of outreach and understanding the kind of initiatives that these clubs take. That's how I framed this essay.
Quite impressive, actually. I think you did a lot of insightful research, as you mentioned that you specifically spoke to members of the clubs for the particular school, and then you crafted your essay accordingly. So outreach, yes, it's very important, as you mentioned. So yeah, when you mentioned that you reached out to a lot of people from Cornell, was that the same for when you applied to Kellogg? So did you apply the same strategies while applying to the other school as well?
Yes, Kellogg was a round 2 application, so happened much later. But again, pretty much the same. One is, of course, it's absolutely like it's almost a hygiene factor to attend all the admission events, all the individual interaction events that these clubs are arranging. That I think gives you a very good idea of what these clubs do. A lot of times the club members will also leave their email. You can reach out to them individually. And of course, LinkedIn, like I said, is a very good platform. So reach out to people, reach out to alumni in your target industries, and also make sure that, I think towards the end of the application cycle, that's the time when they would receive maximum requests. So they might not be able to allocate time to you individually. So it's important to plan your application cycle in a way that, you've given them sufficient time. You're reaching out to them, let's say 2.5 months in advance. That not just, shows that you respect their time, but also that you will have enough time to build on your answers based on the insights that you receive from them.
Okay, that's great. So we have come to know a lot about your profile, your professional experience. I think one important factor that is also taken into account in business school, applications is also some extracurricular or something that you have not done beyond your work experience, maybe your hobbies, your passions, your interests. So did you also highlight these in your applications? Like, did you have something, say, in the community or as an extracurricular that you highlighted in your application?
Yeah, like I said, the things that I highlighted, of course, there were extracurricular things that I mentioned, but I don't think that forms a part of any essay. It is important to list your accomplishments and any noteworthy achievements that you might have, but that merely gets listed as as a single line in your extracurricular achievements. What is important to kind of stress on is what you draw from these experiences. Again, I had enough volunteer experiences, and what is a unique experience that I derived out of it. And volunteer experiences are something that a lot of us do, but there are enough number of times there are opportunities for you to take initiative there and plan things differently. Like in my case, I was working with the contractor community, and I had specifically designed training programs for them, cut down on the length of their training program. So and that sort of had an impact on their daily earning wages. So like I said, it's not just the activity that you should be mentioning, but it's important to highlight what your unique contribution was and what did you do differently.
Okay, that's interesting as well. I love I love the volunteering experience. It's really something different and unique that I have heard of. Right. So now now that you are done with your essays and you are done with the entire application, let's move on to the interviews. So a lot of times what happens is when we already have an MBA, we have some sort of judgment clouds in our mindset that a second MBA may not be taken into, say, it may not be looked at with the right light. But did it happen in your case? So say that in your interviews or anywhere in your application, did you feel that your first MBA was a deterrent somewhere, or was it like really helpful for you?
So it did come up in the interview. But like I said, if you've really thought through your post-career goals and you know how that MBA is specifically going to help you, see, it's not like a job interview really. So people are not drilling down your answers. It's more conversational in nature. But at the same time, it's important to be affirmative and sure about what you're saying. So if you've done that research and you can establish the link between, so you might look at what your post MBA career goals are, and there is probably MBA is the fastest route, or there is no other route to get there. It always helps to justify that in the interview. But it came up just about just like how any other question would. We didn't spend a lot of time on discussing this aspect, but at the same time, it was important that you had a good enough answer or approach for it.
Right. That's I think a lot of times I've seen that people have this misconception that if you already have an MBA, then you'll be looked at in a bad light, and then people will judge you that you already have a degree. Then why are you coming? But as you have seen in Malvika's case, she had an MBA, but then she was able to craft her goals properly. That she is somewhere and she wants to go somewhere, and MBA is the second MBA really makes sense for her to pivot into that particular career path. And as she mentioned, I think it's product marketing, right, that you are looking to venture into after your Cornell MBA. Right. So that's amazing. I hope that, it's really great for you. I hope that you're starting this fall, if I am not mistaken. Okay, this summer. Okay, so that's great. And yeah, I hope that, everything turns out well. So I really loved having this session with you. A lot of interesting and unique insights. So let's go on to the comments and let's start taking up questions one by one. We'll start taking up questions from the top. And at this point, also, you can start asking your questions to Malvika. Right. So let's take up one by one question. Okay. So let's take this question by Jaskaran, that how did you keep yourself consistent throughout your preparation? I study for 1 or 2 days consistently, and then because of any reason, I cannot keep up. And then again, after weeks, I'm at the same point. So yeah, the question is around consistency.
So I would just say that, of course, keep your end goal in mind. And at the same time, don't burn yourself out. And when I say that, I mean, towards the beginning of your prep and also towards the end of your prep, make sure that you haven't left too much towards the end where you are closer to the actual exam, and also make sure that you aren't trying to fit everything in a short span of time. So it's important to be mindful of the overall time that you're spending devoting to your prep, and remember that being consistent is the key. And that's what will also get you through the final exam. So the point is that plan it well, and again, plan it in a way that on a daily basis you're giving it just enough time and not overloading yourself on certain days, because that might burn you out early.
Right. So yeah, I agree. And also, I think that a comment has been posted with a link to a particular article. So Jasakaran, you can just go through that, and you can think about how to go about in your focus and in your consistency. So yeah, let's take up the next question. This is like, if someone has the GPA in the range of 2.5 and a GMAT score of 750, will the GPA impact the admission? So I think that this is a very sort of like a very subjective question, because often it is that your high GMAT score can compensate if you have an average or lower than average GPA. But then again, it is really subjective. We cannot say it with guarantee because it all depends on the ADCOM and how your entire application is built. So it is not just factor 1, factor 2, factor 3, and the summation of all, but it is about how you have placed your entire experience, how if you have a low GPA, then you have a good GMAT score, as I can see, but then make sure that the other elements of your application are, well highlighted too.
Yeah,
right?
I think, like she was mentioning, there's no one aspect to the application that's particularly important. Also, if you look at it, if GPA is something that you cannot change right now, the only thing in your control is your GMAT score. So try and maximize your chances there.
That's right. Completely agree with that. Okay, so let's talk about this question from Devjyoti. So how important is it to go for a second MBA degree? And I'm an Indian applicant holding a BTech, having 9 years of experience in an IT MNC. What should be my focus point for getting into an elite school? Malvika, would you like to take this up?
Yeah, I think I honestly did not look at it from a second MBA degree per se, because if you look at it in a lot of these programs, it's essentially the 2-year program fitted into one, right? You have a accelerated core courses component that you take up in the beginning, and then you shift on to electives. That's what the program structure is. So again, like I said, in my case, I was looking at skills that are transferable, and I thought that I didn't need an internship. Internship, in my opinion, is a more important factor to be taken into consideration. If the career switch that you're looking at, let's say if you're looking at moving into consulting, or you're looking at moving from IT to CPG, you obviously need to leverage that internship and have something to talk about when you approach recruitments. But if in like in my case, I wasn't looking at a huge transition like this. So that's really the question you should be asking yourself, because if you are clear about what you want to derive out of the MBA program, you will find ways to justify it in your application. I know a lot of second MBA candidates who also do a 2-year program, because that's the kind of career change they expect to make after it. So the bigger question here is your transition, and not whether you have a prior MBA or not. So I would say approach it in that way.
Amazing answer. Very, very good points shared. And I think, Debjyoti, you found this answer insightful because, yeah, she has explained it really well. It is not about getting a second degree or just adding a degree on paper. It is about you need to craft and you to think about whether you really need that or not. Like in her case, she needed the 1-year MBA. In your case or in someone else's case, they may also need the 2-year MBA to make a huge pivot. Right. So let's talk about, okay, so let's take this question by Darshan. So when does one know that he or she is ready for an MBA? Like how to analyze that our work X is of good quality at par with the prerequisite of an MBA? Malvika?
Again, of course, it has to be linked to your, so 2-3 things to consider here. Of course, your post-MBA career goal. What are your target programs? What are your target schools? And then look at the average GMAT score, average experience that people generally have there. I think those are insights and data mining that you really have to do at your end. But I would say, because I've had a previous MBA and because now I have the 6 years experience post MBA, I would say I would probably say that 4 or 5 years, when you really have a perspective on things you can do, because at the end of the day, an MBA is for you, it's also for the business school to see if you can contribute to the class, if you bring something to the table. So to maximize your learning and what you contribute to the business school, it's important that you have a perspective before you take up an international MBA. So once you feel that, even if you've worked in only one industry, but if you feel that over a period of 3 years, 5 years, you've kind of established a very strong foothold of that particular industry, and there are certain skills that are definitely transferable, that you can speak about, that you can bring a unique perspective to the class, I think that should be an indicator when you start application and start the process.
Great. I think, yeah, I mean, bang on, correct answer, and very well shared with all the insights. And yeah, so that's how you get to know that your work X is of right, it's of the good quality that you are mentioning here. So it's not the years, but, the experience that you have put into your years and when you have really worked well enough. So I have seen people with 2 and 3 years of experience also who have gotten into top business schools. So yeah, but the experience should matter of what you have done in that particular 3 years. Okay, so now we have a Cornell specific question. I think this is an interesting question, that how do you go about answering the goal statement essay? I think Cornell has a goal statement essay, right? So if you could just, give an example of how you went about that.
Yeah, so like in my case, I knew that tech is what I want to pivot into. And then I was looking at specific roles. So 2 things there. One is how realistic is that post-MBA goal from the college or the program point of view. So if you're talking of goals that that hardly anyone gets into post MBA, then that seems like you haven't done your research enough. Okay, so first is look at the target industry, look at what are the immediate starting points. So again, LinkedIn serves as a good platform for this. Then once you're clear of this is the target industry, this is the post MBA career goal, start speaking to people who are in your target roles. They will not just help you understand what the day-to-day activities in a role like that are, so that obviously your answers will be much better from that point of view. You will also get an idea of whether you're targeting the right thing. Second, if you were to talk with those people about understanding the career path, right? So that gives you a lot of insights. Like in my case, if I was looking at product marketing, I knew that let's say 4 or 5 years down the line, I'm talking about being a director handling, let's say, Asia markets for a particular company. So I have to know if that's a realistic goal to have or not. And that's what these conversations will help you understand. So do your research on, what your immediate goal is, whether it's a realistic one, and then speak to those people to understand that 4 or 5 years or 10 years down the line, what are the different options that are available to people on the same career path.
Right. Okay. Yeah, well shared. And I think, yeah, that's how you frame the goal question. It's not just Cornell. I think a lot of these schools do have this goal statement, just maybe phrased in different kind of ways. And, the word limit may be a bit more stringent in some of the business schools, as I have seen. So yeah, you need to be very, very specific. And I know that for me, I think Darden has a very specified word limit for the goals essay, and so does Fuqua. So you need to really think about it for like a few days, and then, just write and write. And until you get to that precise point where even if you read that, even if someone, say from your family, or say your mom, dad, or, your sibling reads that, he or she is able to understand that, yes, this is what you want to do post MBA. So it's as clear as that. Don't put in vague statements. Don't put in unrealistic goal statements that, no one would be able to help you with, because that's not going to help you. Say that, if you are, say, a preliminary maths teacher, then you want to be an investment banker without any reference or without any link, then that's a really vague goal statement. So yeah, be objective and be to the point while answering these questions. Okay, so let's take this question. So I think applying in R3, why is it not considered favorable? What are the pros and cons? So yeah, I mean, I think one con that I can think of, I think, even you would agree with me, Malvika, is that because we are international students, we wouldn't get a lot of time for the visa processing, right?
Yeah. And by the simple fact, from the business school point of view, when you apply is that they are just able to gauge your interest levels in the program,
Yes.
right? So obviously round 1, round 2 versus round 3, which is coming in as a late application. Plus, I think in the competitive nature of applications, you have a better chance if you apply in round 1 or round 2.
Definitely. Yeah, so that answers the question. And obviously target the earlier rounds, if possible, then the early action rounds also that the business schools have. Okay, so let's talk. Yeah, so let's talk about this question. It's a very interesting question by Apur. So how did you decide between an MBA in India versus abroad? So was it just because of the geography, or, was it because of rankings or any other factor?
Yes, so geography, of course, plays an important role. So in my case, I was clear about the US business schools only. Also, so yeah, you would have a post MBA career goal, and you would see yourself working in a specific country. And so for me, example, that country was US. So I didn't look at UK business schools, because that, UK Europe business schools would have made it tougher for me to land up a job in the US. So obviously look at where is it that you want to work. The other is that I've also spent some time in the US last year. I was there for some time, and I just feel that it's, and again, my personal opinion, I feel that it's a more global culture, and that's what I wanted to derive out of my experience, out of my MBA experience. And so those two happen to be the primary reason. But I would say, obviously, look at what your post-MBA geography is, and of course, there'll be personal considerations into this. So depending on that, so if it happens to be US, obviously your chances with a US business schools are safer, better as compared to a European business school. Again, personal choice.
Yeah. Okay, so let's take up maybe 2 more questions. Okay, so let's take up the second last question, that please let us know, what does Cornell ask during interviews? And how do you know who conducts the interview?
Okay, so you don't get to know who conducts the interview. You can just fix an interview date. That's something that you get an invite for booking a slot once you're selected in the first round. So what happens after that is, I would say it's more a conversational interview. They have read your application, they know everything that's there, they're trying to figure out more about you, and so it will be an extension of what your career goals are. Also a lot of situational questions. So obviously writing the essay and presenting your leadership qualities is one thing, but you need to be backed up with a lot of examples as to, if you say that this is one time that I faced a difficult situation, or this is one time that I had to take a decision when the situation was very ambiguous, there's no data. So things like that. Make sure that you have an appropriate situation for each of these questions, and also make sure the answer is not long, it's interesting for the listener. It has to be a short, crisp story, but at the same time, at your end, you have to be prepared and ensure that if you have any counter questions on that, how are you prepared to answer and tackle those questions? So situational questions, your work experience, and obviously your post-MBA career goals, the program specifically, what are you expecting to derive out of it? I think these 5 things you have to be absolutely thorough with. My case, the interview was with the admissions committee member. While one of them was conducting the interview, the other was on call. She was listening to it and she didn't intervene in between, but it was 2 AdCom members.
Okay. Great. Let's quickly take up the last question, and then we can approach the end of the session. So Aishwarya asks, I am planning to take my GMAT in June, keeping July as buffer. So what would be the ideal time for profile building? Okay, so let's not talk about profile building, but let's talk about, how long did you take to say, reach out to people, craft your application, think about your MBA story and craft your essays in the best possible manner? How long did you take in that process?
I think I took about 2.5 months from finishing the exam to submitting the application, and that involved some additional effort on weekends in terms of having those conversations with people, because again, people are also free on weekends. That's when you frame your answers. Also, if like in my case, I wasn't really going ahead with the consultant, so I needed to make sure that I have enough edits of my essay ready. I have vetted this with enough people, and I know it shouldn't be that I have a particular story in mind and that's what I end up submitting. So with each essay, I had at least 4 or 5 iterations before I submitted the application. So give yourself this much time. I think the ideal time would be obviously as much as you can, but in my case, I gave it 2.5 months after the exam.
Okay, yeah, that sounds fair enough. And I completely agree with that particular timeline that you mentioned. That's very important. Right, so we have approached the end of the session. It was a great session, Malvika. Thank you for sharing so many insights. So before we close, would you like to share anything additional that maybe, we missed out in the entire session? Any additional tip to our future applicants, if any?
I would just say that, yes, GMAT is a very important factor. And like in my case, I had to end up taking it 2-3 times. So make sure that you've planned enough time for that as well. And like I mentioned earlier, I have reached out to a lot of people in this whole application process. And if anything, I would want to pay it forward. So anybody who's targeting Cornell or one-year programs, feel free to reach out. And then, I'm willing to take this ahead and discuss this with you.
That's amazing. Thank you for sharing that. And thank you for also letting the audience know that, the business school people, really, they are very helpful. And yes, you can reach out to people. They'll help you as soon as they get time. Right. So thank you, Malvika. Thank you for joining us today in this evening. So I want to tell everyone who's watching this that even in the next week, we are going to have one more session about Cornell Johnson Business School, where, we'll have a couple whose names are Hasib and Kalaivani, and they'll share their application experience at Cornell and how did they leverage that particular experience to get placed at Amazon. So it's going to be a very interesting and very different kind of session. So make sure that you are tuned in, subscribe to the channel, and just keep waiting for updates, and you can add that to your reminder as well. So we have even posted the link to the session in the comment section. So you can have a look at it there. So yeah, with this, we will wind up the session for today. Thank you, Malvika. Thank you for joining us again. And
Thank you.
have a great day, night, and evening, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.